his homeland, he enjoys a near godlike status. Great players hail him as a batting genius. He is intelligent and handsome, yet decency and humility are his watchwords. Still one of the finest batsmen in the world today, Sachin Tendulkar is one of ESPN's legends of cricket.
This is high in the air, and how far is that going? That's up in the terraces.
Eden Park, Auckland, March 1994. On a seaming wicket, Sachin Tendulkar was promoted to open the batting in a one-day international against New Zealand. He made 84 from 49 balls.
As they're all getting to their feet for one of the great one-day innings you will ever see.
Tendulkar will go down certainly in Indian history, I think, as probably their best player. And there have been some very good ones, but this modern Indian generation where they've been able to see him play all his cricket on television, I think will result in him being remembered forever.
And he's going through the covers again, and that's another four. Well, where can this man hit them? He can hit them everywhere.
Child prodigy, I think, is one of those very few great players who started off looking special. You know, at the age of 14, 15, anybody who saw him realized that he was a child prodigy, and he never let anybody down. You know, we had huge expectations when we saw him the first time, and Indian expectations can be quite, you know, heavy and sometimes could be a little impractical as well, but he fulfilled all those expectations.
And look at that, just straight down the pitch. This man is a wonderful player, and we're seeing the best of him today.
Beautiful shot. Oh, awesome.
Tendulkar's technique is the benchmark for modern batsmen. Don Bradman believed that he was the closest thing to himself that he'd ever seen.
The best way to sum up Tendulkar's technique is to go back to what Sir Donald Bradman said about him. And that is that when Bradman was watching him bat one day and he said to his wife, "Come and have a look at this bloke bats like me." And he was talking about Tendulkar.
I think he's the most complete batsman of his age and perhaps of all time, because he scored runs against every kind of bowling, everywhere in the world, every situation, all kinds of pitches, and that's something you can't say about everybody in the world.
Oh, hello. What a smashing shot.
I think he's the best player in the world today, without a shadow of doubt. A small man you see like Bradman, but his footwork is out of this world. Tremendous, so much time in which to play the ball. And again, as I said about all greats, tremendous balance, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Tendulkar is close to being the most perfect batsman one has ever seen. His back left is straight, his balance is unbelievable, he can play off either foot, he can play on either side, and again, that ability that separates the men from the boys, the ability to hit the good ball for boundaries or sixes.
Great shot. Absolutely smashed it to the boundary.
All out appeal, this could be very close, he's given it.
Tendulkar also influences the game with his skillful bowling and athletic and accurate fielding. But with the bat, he devastates bowlers and dominates games.
That's a crashing shot through extra cover.
Sachin as a batsman is just, you know you're watching someone special. You know that you're photographing someone who will only come along, say once every 100 years.
He brought a new dimension to Indian cricket. You had a Gavaskar on the one hand who grind bowlers out and who brought a lot of pride for us as a world-class batsman. But suddenly here was someone who's taking attacks apart. And I think Tendulkar was a product of his generation. He came in when India were a prouder nation, India as a nation had greater self-belief, and he came in at a time when India was looking for that kind of hero.
Oh, what a shot. Gora stand up and poured a beautiful on drive.
Charging and playing it over mid-wicket.
This incredible star who is, you know, sometimes they say the stock market would have gone up with Sachin's performances. You know, the whole Indian, you know, population, you know, wanting him to succeed, and going around with that on your shoulders for 20 years, you know, that is, you know, the most amount of pressure, you know, a cricketer can seriously have on his shoulders. So everyone would just say, you know, he's been the most phenomenal technician, but the hunger and drive and passion the guy has had to have that longevity is phenomenal.
Pulls it away through the onside. He's heading for another one.
Growing up in the cricket-mad city of Mumbai, the young Sachin Tendulkar was drawn to the game after watching India triumph in the 1983 World Cup.
Long back in 1983, I was just 10 years old and I saw India lifting the World Cup. That really inspired me a lot. And I used to bat 5 times a day in the nets. And that really helped me a lot, and I played lots and lots of practice matches which gave me match temperament, because however long you may practice, you need to go out there in the middle and score runs.
Tendulkar began his first-class career with a century at just 15 years of age. He went on to become the first batsman to make a century on debut in each of the 3 Indian domestic competitions.
One of the things that always struck me about Tendulkar, I played with him in the first 6-7 years of his career, was that whenever he got success, he became more careful about it. You know, he was never arrogant, never casual about his cricket.
Tendulkar made his Test debut at the age of 16 years and 205 days. He faced the challenge of playing Test cricket at such a young age with remarkable composure.
The day he got into the Indian team, he started batting in the nets. He looked so good that everybody knew that this fellow is going to go very, very far. When he was technically sound, he had very cool head on his shoulders. And it was, you know, like the way his body language and the way he behaved. It never looked as if he came into the Indian team for the first time.
Yeah, I was terribly nervous. I didn't know what was happening around me. I thought for a sec it was a school game going on, and I batted like as if you know, one would bat in a school game, which is that particular moment I can never forget, because I felt this was the first and the last Test match of my career.
Struck away down the offside. That's a beautifully hit shot by Tendulkar.
Following his debut series against Pakistan, Tendulkar toured New Zealand in 1990 and made a lasting impression.
Pushing and running, and that will be his 50. Applause ringing out for Sachin Tendulkar, his 3rd half-century in Test cricket, the 16-year-old.
Can you imagine a 16-year-old kid scoring 80-odd in a Test match? I mean, you cannot. That's how good he was. That's how freaky Sachin Tendulkar was and still is.
And he plays a crunching shot square of the wicket on the offside. Might get cut off. No, it's not.
Sachin Tendulkar scored his maiden Test century at Old Trafford in 1990, becoming the 2nd youngest batsman to reach 3 figures in a Test match.
It was remarkable not only for the fact that he was still a teenager when he made 3 figures in a Test match for the first time, but it was also remarkable because it was a very significant innings in that it helped India save the Test match. Tendulkar showed a remarkable degree of maturity and played a really top-class innings.
One for the coaching manual. We're seeing this afternoon the emergence of one of the shining stars of the 90s for world cricket.
Against Australia the following summer, he made 2 more glorious hundreds. The first was at the SCG.
Yes, here it comes. It's great running. Well played. Sachin Tendulkar. His first 100 at the semi-cricket ground. A magnificent knock in good time.
His first Test 100 in Australia came at the Sydney Cricket Ground in the first week of 1992, and I'll never forget it because it was one of those hundreds where you realise you were watching someone special. And it was the youngest. He was the youngest player to score a Test century in Australia, and he did it with a style that everyone who was there knew they were watching something special, and they were very lucky to be there.
To me, his defining shot was always when he stood up on the back foot and punched through cover. But when he hit the straight drive between mid-on, even sometimes just wide of behind the bowler and just wide of mid-on, that's when you realize how big that bat looked. I think anyone who can present that size of bat to the bowler had to be technically just an outstanding player.
Tendulkar's second century of the series was in Perth, on the fast and bouncy pitch at the Wacker.
The Australian tour actually confirmed the fact that this man was destined for greatness, and it was a tour that India failed miserably, and so did most of its batsmen. Tendulkar looked different, and he was just 17 years old, in his second year of international cricket. So the difference between him and the rest was clearly evident. And that innings at Perth, one of the bounciest pitches on that tour, and it's been one of the fastest. What was striking about the innings was how comfortably he got 100 in the first innings. And everybody who watched him got excited. I remember attending a couple of dinners in Australia, and people like Bill Lawry, Richie Beno couldn't stop, gushing over the talent of Sachin Tendulkar. So it was sealed, signed and delivered that here's the next Indian batting great.
I think the knock I played in Australia on Perth, it was a 5th Test match, and I got 114. I think still that's the best innings I've played.
One of the first Indian batsmen who went out there and attacked fast bowlers and had some of the shots that a lot of Indian batsmen wouldn't have, the pull shots and the high bounce back foot drive and all that. So he was just somebody who looked like he was God's gift to cricket.
Oh, that's a magnificent shot.
By 1996, Tendulkar had overtaken Mohammad Azharuddin as the leading scorer in one-day internationals, in 62 fewer innings than Azharuddin.
He's been the one batsman that has dominated this sort of era, and I think he may go on to dominate eras to come as well, depending on how long he can play for. He's been superb. He's dominated one-day cricket especially.
There we go, and he's hit it straight down the ground for 4.
He's rewritten the history books. He's done absolutely brilliantly all over the world, and you just have to look at him, and he's clearly one of the all-time legends.
And this is 50. Good knock by young Tendulkar.
I've never seen Sachin sort of struggle against any particular kind of bowlers apart from Ashley Giles for some reasons, or Ray Price. And yeah, that's really his greatness, that he's perhaps the most wholesome batsman of his age. Lara and Tendulkar are the two greats of their era, but Lara has had ups and downs, which Sachin never has.
Gone. Outstanding shot from Tendulkar.
'96 also saw Tendulkar assume the Indian captaincy. He began with an emphatic home series victory against Australia. But by 1998, India was struggling, and Tendulkar's form had tapered off. It seemed as though the burden of captaincy was weighing heavily on him.
There's a saying in India that God gives you everything and keeps something himself. Now, to judge a captain, I believe you've got to be in the side. You've got to be around the squad, you've got to be in the side to make a judgment on someone as a captain, because there's so many elements involved in the final outcome of the game. But I thought he was too stressed as a captain. I spoke to him around that time as well, and I could sense he was very stressed in that role, and it's just started at some point to take a toll on his batting. So maybe he was just destined to be a great batsman and not be among the all-time great captains, but if you're destined to be as good a batsman as he is, then everything else pales anyway.
Relieved of the captaincy, Tendulkar again found form. Between March 1998 and July 1999, he made 10 one-day centuries and 5 test match centuries. Tendulkar himself nominates consecutive innings against Australia in Sharjah in 1998 as his finest one-day performances.
I think the one at Sharjah, 143 against Australia, that was a tremendous knock. I mean, a game before that he scored 134. The finals he scored 143 and brought victories for India in both those games. And let me tell you, single-handed wins those were. Sharjah wicket wasn't very easy to bat on, and the Australians scored heavily against India. And this little champion goes in and scores those hundreds. The hundreds, that two big ones that gave India the victory. I think I would rate those 2 innings as his best in one-day internationals.
Azharuddin was sacked as captain after India's poor performances in the 1999 World Cup, and Tendulkar again took over. Again he began well, but India was overwhelmed by Steve Waugh's Australians. After losing another 2 tests against South Africa, Tendulkar again relinquished the captaincy.
I don't think captaincy comes naturally to Tendulkar. I don't think he's a leader of men. He's always been this, young kid, tremendously talented, who should be playing for somebody else. Somebody else takes care of everything, and you just go out there and bat for us and get us those 350, 400 runs.
At home against Australia in 1998, Tendulkar faced Shane Warne on a turning wicket and made 155 not out.
One of the things I found remarkable about Tendulkar is that you can't define him by one stroke. You know that Lara has a couple of strokes, Ponting has his pull, and then a lot of players have a signature strokes. Tendulkar doesn't have a signature strokes because he plays all the strokes almost equally beautifully. Of course, my favorite stroke would be the back foot cover drive that he plays, on his toes and hit the ball on the up. That's a rare talent.
In early 1999, India and Pakistan played a test series on Indian soil for the first time in 12 years. After being dismissed for naught in the first innings, Tendulkar was at the crease as India crashed to 5 for 82, chasing 271 to win. He went on to make one of the great test match centuries.
Tendulkar is just, you're watching him bat, everything is right. I can't think I've ever seen him play a duff shot. You see batsmen get it wrong every so often, maybe they just don't read the conditions, but with Tendulkar, he just gets it right every time. It's like he's read the script.
It's a big shot, a very big shot indeed from Tendulkar. 1 bounce, 4 over extra cover.
Tendulkar's popularity in India is unprecedented, but despite the enormous pressure, he retains his humility and dignity.
Back home in India, it's a little difficult to move around freely. People love the sport and the sportsmen, so it gets a little difficult. You don't have your privacy. Well, that's a price one has to pay for it. But looking at the other side of the coin, I feel it's the love and the good wishes which when you go on the ground, you have 100,000 people cheering for you, praying for your success. That it does help, and it means a lot to me.
Over a long time, he's been under scrutiny, under the spotlight, and you can never really look back and say he's done anything wrong. So he's dealt with it particularly well.
Oh, he's like a god in this country. I mean, he's treated like a god, and he behaves like a god as well, literally, because a person with so much of expectations, with so much of pressure on his head, you never see him lose his temper. As I said, he would, if anybody wants to get photographed with him, he'll never say no.
He is the absolute king. He rules that country, I think. He's just the love and the passion for the game of cricket in India. It's remarkable that it hasn't gone to his head. I mean, he is such a humble person, so down to earth, and again, got time for most people. I would hate to be in his shoes. Just from that side where the pressure on his time and lack of privacy in the country that he lives, it must be pure. Really, a test of his character. But he's come through. You know, I've never seen him have an outburst on the field against an opponent with his own team side, amongst the public. So he's a person who really he's kept his nose really clean, and I just think he's got a good heart.
Now in his 30s, Tendulkar's touch has barely deserted him, although he did go without a Test century between November 2002 and January 2004. Critics questioned whether he was still the master, still capable of dominating an attack. He answered the doubters with a typically belligerent, unbeaten 241 against the world champion Australians in Sydney.
He came out that day. He wasn't a guy who got big scores early in his career, but he started slowly. It was a flat pitch. Steve Waugh's last Test, big occasion, great player, big score.
Technically perfection, really. I enjoyed watching him bat when I played against him. I didn't want him to get too many when England were playing against him, but he did get runs against England, and you had to admire what you were watching as well, because he's just a brilliant technician. Longevity as well in a career, I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal. He probably started his Test career 5-6 years before me. He's going to finish his Test career 5-6 years after I've retired. And that sheer passion, physically, to keep yourself in good shape as well. The hunger and desire to keep scoring runs.
You've got to go by statistics to a large extent. You look at the players who have the averages over 50, and they are the greatest players, in not only statistically but in every sense of the word. And I think Tendulkar's statistics there just prove his value.
Brilliant. Charging over the top. How far has it gone? Has it gone far enough? It has, and Tendulkar has 100.
Sachin Tendulkar is the sort of modern Indian great. I wasn't entirely sure about him. I mean, I know Bradman, as soon as he saw him, phoned up his wife and said, and Bradman told me this himself, phoned up his wife and said, you've got to come and have a look at this, because I think this is what I might have looked like. And that in itself, you know, was saying something, and that happened before I was convinced. Then I went and watched him play on some of the good wickets, and in particular I saw him play some innings in Sharjah, in one-day cricket, and he was just something else. I mean, they just couldn't bowl to him. No one could bowl to him. And he played every shot in the book. I mean, he didn't just play at that wonderful straight drive back past the onside of the stumps down the other end. He played every single shot in the book.
I set myself a lot of goals, but I keep it to myself. I don't usually speak out. But it's always nice to have targets. Sometimes you reach your target, you feel happy, you want to better it. If you don't reach your target, the next time you try harder. And if you surpass your target, you want to try and score more and more runs. So eventually it boils down to scoring more and more runs the next time you go in. I think there is always scope for improvement, and one is never satisfied with what you've achieved in life. You want to try and get more out of it, and that's the same case with me. I mean, I want to try and score as many runs as possible, and try and be as solid as possible and play good cricket.
Tendulkar, tremendous cricket, wonderful cricket. I would come out on my bed any time to watch him. He's great. I mean, you just look at his record. You know, he loves playing. He loves the game. And he knows what he represents. He knows he represents his people really well, and his team, and the game of itself.
By general consensus, he is still one of the best batsmen in the game today, and is amongst the top 4 specialist bats of all time. He remains cricket's most popular player, particularly on the subcontinent. We celebrate him amongst ESPN's legends of cricket.